بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واذكر في الكتاب مريم إذ انتبذت من أهلها مكانا شرقيا واتخذت من دونهم حجابا فأرسلنا إليها روحنا فتمثل لها بشرا سويا. قالت إني أعوذ بالرحمن منك إن كنت تقيا. قال إنما أنا رسول ربك لأهب لك غلاما زكيا. Today is the day of Christmas, and I have recited to you some verses of chapter 19 of the Holy Quran. And the name of this chapter is Maryam, after the name of mother of Jesus, known as Mary in the West. And its English translation is, and mention Mary in the book. When she drew aside from her family to an eastern place, she screened herself from them. Then we sent to her our spirit, and it appeared to her as a well-made man. She said, I flee for refuge from you to the beneficent, if you are the one guarding against evil. He said, I am only bearer of a message of your Lord, that I will give you a pure boy. And then some verses later, which I haven't recited, Mary says, Mary is in pain and so on. And so a voice came to her from beneath her, grieve not, surely your Lord has provided a stream under you. And shake towards yourself the trunk of the palm tree. It will drop on you fresh, ripe dates. So eat and drink, etc. Now there are a number of things that I want to point out to you. The Holy Quran says, فَأَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهَا رُوحَنَا. And Allah sent to Mary His spirit. Then we sent to her our spirit, and it appeared to her in human form. And Mary is frightened, but the person says, I'm only bearer of a message from your Lord, that I will give you, that He will give you a pure boy. Now, the interesting thing is that, you see, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib, he claimed that God spoke to him. And everyone objected. And they said, this is against Islam. God only speaks to prophets. And yet here we have in the Holy Quran, God speaking to a non-prophet, to Maryam. But not only that, people then said, well, okay, maybe the God does speak to people. But Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad said that an angel came to him. But here again, we see God saying that He sent an angel in the form of a man to Mary. We sent to Mary our spirit, and it appeared to her in human form. So God does speak to human beings, and God does send angels to speak to human beings. This is not me saying it. This is mentioned in the Holy Quran. There are other examples that are mentioned before, like God speaking to Mother of Moses and so on. The point is, whoever turns to God in distress and affliction, God guides them in some way or another. You may hear a voice, you may dream something, etc., etc. Because without that, how would we know that God exists? But the other interesting thing that I want to point out to you is a later verse, and the throes of childbirth drove Mary to the trunk of a palm tree. She said, "Oh, would that I had died before this and had been a thing forgotten." A voice came to her, etc., and it said, "Shake the trunk of the palm tree, it will drop on you fresh, ripe dates." Dates don't ripen in December. Dates ripen in the summer. And even in the New Testament, we have shepherds, and they were out. Now, if it was 25th of December, you would find that it gets very cold at night in the desert. And it would not be possible for the shepherds to be tending their sheep out in the desert. So that shows that Jesus wasn't actually born on the 25th of December. What happened was that it was a pagan festival that used to be celebrated before people embraced Christianity. And they carried on with the same festival. And I often give examples of, for example, marriage rituals in Punjab part of Pakistan and Punjab part of India are more or less the same. The mehndi and this and that and whatever. It's hard to tell whether it's a Muslim marriage or a Sikh or a Hindu marriage. In one case, for the wedding itself, you'll have nikah, and in the other case, you'll have people going around the fire or the granthi doing something. But all the rituals before that are the same. So it's the same. One could say that they took the pagan festival and they christened it and made it a Christian festival, just like people are christened when they embrace Christianity. But the important thing is not when Jesus was born, but the message that he brought. And let us look at the state of religion and the state of the people to whom Jesus came. Jews were being ruled by Romans. They were a subject people. Religion had become not something for spiritual upliftment, but it had become a business. This is why Jesus is angry when he goes into the temple and he sees that people, rather than worshipping, are actually conducting business. It was like a Sunday market or a Juma bazaar in Pakistan. There were stalls and people were selling their stuff and so on. So Jesus became angry that, you've got this place, this synagogue, to commemorate and remember God. But what is happening? They are conducting trade and business, and they're sitting there and they're lying. When they're bartering and so on, etc., they're lying. So he became angry and he overturned the stalls and all this kind of thing. Now compare that with the state of Muslims when Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad appeared. Muslims across the world were directly or indirectly ruled by Western powers, mostly by the British, but also the French and Dutch and so on. Indonesia, which is a majority Islamic country, was ruled by the Dutch. North Africa, places like Morocco and Lebanon and Algeria and so on, were ruled by the French. It's exactly the same as the state of the Jewish people when Jesus appeared. And the state of the Muslims was the same. Exactly the same. Hypocrisy had come into the religion. The point wasn't what God said, but how can I win this argument? How can I get more people to follow me? How can I earn as much money as possible? And that is still carrying on. That hasn't stopped. There's one country in which someone wanted political support from a religious leader. He was the head of a religious party, and the man said, yes, that's very easy. Government owns huge tracts of land. Give me 10,000 acres. Give my brother so many thousand acres, and you have my support. If that is not selling religion, then what is? It's nothing to do about, do I agree with your policies? Nothing to do with, is what you're doing good for the people? They just give me so much land, so much property, so many assets, and you have my support. And the same thing was, Jews were doing exactly the same thing. And it is very interesting, you see, because when Jesus disappears from Palestine, he leaves behind a council headed by Peter to run the affairs of those Jews who accept Jesus as the Messiah. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad did exactly the same thing. He set up an anjuman to look after the affairs of the community after he had died. And just like in Christianity, St. Paul appeared and twisted Jesus' teachings and claims into something else. The same thing happened with Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Someone rose up and twisted the teachings of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. St. Paul made Jesus, who was a prophet of Allah, into the son of Allah. And those who twisted Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's teachings took him from being a reformer, a mujaddid, and made him into a prophet. Then there is another similarity. Christians were persecuted first by Jews, but also by Romans. And if we look at the history, we see how they were fed to the lions, literally, in the arena, for the pleasure of the people of Rome and the leaders. Exactly the same thing is happening to Ahmadis in some countries. They may not be fed to the lions, but they are being persecuted and killed in the same way. Those Christians were killed to please the Roman population of Rome. Ahmadis are being killed exactly for the same reason and for the same spectacle. But then time passed, and eventually, although Christians overcame persecution, and in the worldly sense they were successful, it was those who had distorted Jesus' message that became successful. And some people say, they ask me, is the same thing going to happen to the Ahmadiyya movement? If the history of the two messiahs, if the history of the Messiah sent to the Jews and the history of the Messiah sent to the Muslims is parallel in all these respects, then does it mean that those who correctly interpret our message, interpret Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's message, they too are going to disappear? But let's continue with the message. Let's continue with the parallel. God created a whole new people called the Muslims to put forward to the world Jesus' correct message that he is not the Son of God, that he is a prophet. And God will do the same thing again. On the face of it, it may appear to some people that those who have distorted Hazrat Sahib's message, they are being successful. I asked someone, we have Yazid and Imam Hussain. Yazid had all the money, like these people have a lot of money. Yazid had the whole of the Muslim Ummah behind him. And these people claim to have a large majority. Yazid martyred Hazrat Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But does that mean that Yazid was correct? And his beliefs and actions were correct? Or does it mean that Hazrat Imam Hussain, although he was slaughtered, was correct? And his beliefs and actions were correct? Who would you side with? But as I said, just like Allah raised a whole new community, and one of the objectives of that community was to establish the unity of Godhead and to prove that Jesus was a great and righteous man, beloved of Allah, but he was a prophet of Allah and not the Son of God or God. This parallel will continue, even if those who are holding up the banner of the true teachings of the promised Messiah, that he was a mujaddid and not a prophet, even if they disappear in their current form, for argument's sake, for supposition, I don't think they will. But even if we suppose that they will, then God will raise another community in their place to show that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a mujaddid and not a prophet. This will continue. And you see, things are changing and they're going in the favor of the teachings of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. In 1960s, you remember there was fighting and disagreement and so on between Christians and Muslims and so on. Everyone knows about crusades, etc. But here is a document which was produced by the Vatican in 1964. And it refers to God's plan. But the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. In the first place, among whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham And together with us, they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. From being heathens and infidels, from being called heathens and infidels, this is the church's position now. Not now, this was 1964, so we're talking about 50 years ago. And then, in another document, the church said, the church has also a high regard for the Muslims. They worship God, who is one, living and subsistence, merciful and mighty, the creator of heavens and earth. Listen to the words again. They worship God who is one. Even those who were misled by St. Paul into thinking that Jesus, there is Trinity and so on, they're now saying they worship God who is one, living and subsistent, the creator of heavens and the earth. And the creator of heavens and the earth, who has spoken to men. They strive to submit themselves without reserve to the hidden decrees of God, just as Abraham submitted himself to God's plan, to whose faith Muslims eagerly link their own. Although not acknowledging him as God, they venerate Jesus as a prophet. His virgin mother they also honor, and even at times they await the day of judgment and the reward of God following the resurrection of the dead. For this reason, they highly esteem an upright life and worship God, and especially by way of prayer, alms deeds, and fasting. This is from those who had misunderstood the message. They are now coming to this. And it goes on to say, the church reproves as foreign to the mind of Christ any discrimination against people or any harassment of them on the basis of their race, color, condition in life or religion, and so on. Accordingly, the footsteps of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, the sacred council earnestly begs the Christian faithful to conduct themselves well among the Gentiles, and if possible, as far as depends on them, to be at peace with all men, and in that way to be true sons of the Father who is in heaven. And there's much more, but time is limited and I don't want to carry it. So if you take the parallel of the two messiahs, then even those who deliberately or otherwise misunderstood the message of the Jewish Messiah are now coming towards what Islam teaches, or what the Messiah, Jewish Messiah himself taught, and not the teachings that were concocted later on. The same thing will happen. The world has no choice but to come to the beliefs of the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement. If Islam is to survive in the West, indeed even in the world, I would say, then it has to move towards these beliefs. Can you survive in the West and say that non-Muslims should be killed? That jihad means to take a sword and go to the Houses of Commons in London and start killing people who are there? Will Islam survive if you say women have no rights? They're less than slaves for men. Can Islam survive what ISIS did? Having markets of non-Muslim girls where you could walk down and buy and sell girls. Can Islam survive the coming of a new prophet? Can Islam survive if people believe that the Holy Quran is incomplete and parts of it are abrogated? Are coming to the teachings of the Muslim Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quranil Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareemun malikun barrahur rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma ansur man nasara dina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam وجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya salah, hayya falah. Qad qamat as-salat, qad qamat as-salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إذا جاء ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آمين.
قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده.
ربنا لك الحمد.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله. استغفر الله. تبارك الله. Thank you for joining us for today's service. I hope you found it useful. This is, I think, the last Friday of 2020, and it has proven to be a very trying year for the whole of humanity. So I request you to keep that in mind in all your prayers and pray that Allah keeps everyone, the whole of humanity, under His protection and safe and sound. And may we learn to live together as friends and brothers and sisters. Until we meet again next Friday, Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.